Welcome to Pop Culture Weekly with Kyle McMahon from iHeartRadio. Your pop culture news, views, reviews, and celebrity interviews on all the movies, TV, music, and pop culture you crave weekly. Here's Kyle McMahon.
So, I am here once again with the always amazing Jacqueline Coley, awards editor at Rotten Tomatoes, who we love. Welcome back. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So the noms just came out for the 2025 Emmy Awards. What are your kind of general thoughts overall?
I mean, really, it was a great year for television, but in the kind of the Emmys this year, it was really feast or famine. If you were one of these shows that ended up being sort of like the heart, sort of beloved one from the Television Academy, you received multiple nominations. Many of these shows broke category records for the number of nominations for a show, stuff like The Studio, shows like Severance. But if you were some of these bubble shows like Squid Game, House of Dragon, or some of the more quiet comedies, you really were just absent from the entire awards conversation, shows like The Rehearsal.
Yeah, and that is interesting because I was shocked that Squid Game didn't get anything at all.
Yeah, Squid Game,
Wow.
House of Dragon, and then people were surprised by a show like Paradise making it in over other shows like Your Friends and Neighbors, which a lot of folks had really enjoyed.
Yeah, there's some interesting things this year. What do you think there's a reason for that? Is it just kind of one of those years?
In truth be known, and we'll talk about this later, HBO, which is kind of known as the perennial spot for primetime, really highly produced, incredible television, they led with nominations. But if we really look at it, it's the streamers that had such a huge dominance this year, and the viewing patterns of, I would say, general Americans have really shifted. I mean, you have HBO, which is Max, which is a streaming service, although it is also linear. But then you have Netflix, you also have Apple, and you even have folks like Amazon with a show like Paradise coming into the mix. And Disney's biggest show outside of Abbott Elementary is Andor, which is only on Disney+.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of these. The drama category. What's your take on the nominations, and who do you think's going to take it?
Well, Severance led in total nominations with 27. And this is definitely one over at Rotten Tomatoes that everybody has been sort of digging. Every single season has been certified fresh, with Ben Stiller. So I think the fact that people have finally watched Severance, its first season was very good, but it was less watched. Now it's sort of this cultural phenomenon. Everyone sort of appreciates the desperate nature of corporate America. I think we all have, especially post-COVID, going back to sometimes these not really fulfilled office spaces. It's really kind of hit the zeitgeist moment. And so I'm really excited for that one. But then a new show like The Pit, which honestly feels like an old show because it echoes so much with ER, that finding its way into the drama category, winning over, like we said, shows like that were snubbed. That is, I think, very noteworthy considering that it really does feel like an old school drama that also was certified fresh and also had great audience scores.
For something like Paradise, which kind of, I feel like, at least in my bubble, kind of flew under the radar viewer-wise, and really buzz-wise, was that a surprise to you for getting a nom for Outstanding Drama?
Well, I will go ahead and say that I did predict it over at RottenTomatoes.com. We have our yearly prediction. So I actually did feel this, but it actually speaks to more of the enduring love affair that the folks within the Television Academy have for Sterling K. Brown. This is a guy who sort of burst onto the scene with a show like The People versus O.J. Simpson, and then goes to cover that bet with an stellar run on This Is Us. Now with Paradise, because he's coming back with the co-creator from This Is Us, I think it was something where the general public doesn't watch it, but television voters have kind of decided if Sterling K. Brown is in it, I'm going to give it its time and I'm going to go ahead and commit to this. And it was one that the critics also liked. It was 87% certified fresh. So I think it has more to do with the Sterling K. Brown of it all. But yeah, I think more people tuned in for him and then found out once they got there how great the show was.
Yeah. How about Andor? Are you surprised to see I don't feel this way, but I feel like oftentimes in major award ceremonies, those types of shows are ignored. Were you surprised about that?
No, I wasn't on that one. Andor was another one that we definitely sort of predicted. The more surprising thing that I found was that Diego Luna was left off of the best actor in a drama series. I mean, this show has really lived and died by everything that he brought to the role of Cassian. So I'm very glad to see that the show got honored, but it was interesting that he wasn't. So it was a bit of a mixed bag for Andor. They've always dominated the creative arts Emmys and a lot of the technical stuff, visual effects, the production design, so on and so forth. But you really would like to see them have more of the actor performances. But side note, voice performances by, I believe, Alan Tudyk and one other were nominated. So the show did get some above the line thing, but again, only in the voice categories.
Okay. And how about The Last of Us? I don't remember, and I'm sure you do, if the first season was nominated. It was, but
yeah, first season was nominated, and also Pedro got nominated for the first season.
That's right.
Very well, yeah, it had a pretty good run in the first season. But this second season was less well received, so it was interesting that pretty much every category that they expected, they had another slew of nominations. And Pedro Pascal, who's only in half of the episodes, still managed to garner a Best Lead Actor nomination.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I feel like everybody loves him, in my opinion,
It's another one where it's like, and this is the thing with the Emmys ballot that I really want people to understand. Think about how many shows that you want to catch that you haven't, and think about how many names are involved in those shows. So when folks are sitting down to make these votes, being somebody like Pedro and Sterling K. Brown and other folks that has that really instant name recognition, and more importantly, a name you can't forget because they're in a project every other week, that really helps them with voting. I mean, it's a joke, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sterling, I mean, he's, as you said, he's such an amazing actor in general. Like, I've never watched anything that he's done that I was disappointed in,
Yeah. No, same. Absolutely.
So who are you thinking it'll go to for Outstanding Drama?
Well, at this point, I feel I've made the show The Pit my personality. I fell in love with it. I love talky procedural shows, whether it be a hospital or a cop drama. Like, that is the type, like Law and Order raised me, and ER like put me to bed. It's so that. But I have to see The White Lotus, those acting nominations really dominating those below those supporting casts, all of them getting noms, has to make me think that along with the sort of virality of, Buddhism and Parker Posey and the Patrick Schwarzenegger and the SNL of it all, it seems like White Lotus was just so a part of the consciousness that it may ride that wave of public understanding into an Emmy win. I could really see that happening.
And do you think that it ever, and this is kind of in general, but using White Lotus as an example, when there's multiple people, so many people from a series that are nominated, does it ever cannibalize the voters?
I mean, sometimes it does, but like from a show, even like last year with The Last of Us, where they had a ton of guest star performances that ended up being nominated, it seems that although that does happen, they eventually usually coalesce around one performance that stands out on top of the other ones. And I think this year, especially with somebody like Parker Posey, really sort of stands above everybody else in that particular show, or even maybe a Carrie Coon. I think it's only when there's two performances where kind of split the vote where I think it might be a little bit different. But with White Lotus, I think there's like a front runner in each of those categories, even amongst the cast.
Okay. Moving to Outstanding Comedy Series. There's some new series there. There's some not surprising series there. What do you think about the noms this year for Outstanding Comedy?
I think it was a great overall microcosm of where television is today. You have network show like Abbott Elementary. You have streaming shows like Nobody Wants This and Only Murderers in the Building. And then you have these new sort of what I would call the new cool kids of Apple popping in there with Shrinking and The Studio, because both of those shows, I think, show what Apple's been quietly doing over there, which is getting some of the biggest stars. I mean, Shrinking earned Harrison Ford his first Emmy nomination at 83 years young. And The Studio, becomes this inside, behind the scenes, satirical look into Hollywood that anybody who works in Hollywood would see truth and kinship. So it's no surprise that this, Hollywood workplace drama is the one that ends up resonating with the Television Academy. I love that. And then we have the controversial figure of the bear.
Mhm.
Is it really a comedy? Is it not really a comedy? Leaning into this idea of what new comedy looks like, which is also a part of the category. So I just like how it shows everything. You have wacky slapstick stuff like What We Do in the Shadows, and then you have really grounded stuff like The Bear, and they all work on this interesting and comedic level.
So it's interesting, with the studio, which I love. What I've noticed, though, was all the people that I talk to that know it and have watched it are in the industry. And
Yes.
I wonder, for an industry voted, award, that doesn't really matter. But is it resonating with the general public? Like, none of my friends that aren't in the business have watched it. So I do wonder about that.
I wonder about it too, because again, I live in a bit of the bubble of the industry and all of my friends live for it. But Apple has said that it has some of the best ratings on the platform for the studio for a comedy. So Severance, I believe, was its lead-in for part of the season. And then the studio had the lead-in for Your Friends and Neighbors after that. And Apple has said all of the shows do extremely well. So I think it does play because, yes, Hollywood stories about Hollywood, but I think what the studio does really well is it's a farce. Like, it's so farcical. It is people think that's what Hollywood people are like. So showing them to be that cartoonish is something that even if you aren't a part of it, you would still like to be it. I've never really followed soccer, but I liked Ted Lasso, and I think that may be the appeal to audiences as well.
That's a great point. Only Murders in the Building. This is, I feel like it's a celebrated show. Has it won any major awards yet?
Yes, actually, this past year at the SAG Awards, it won Best Comedy Ensemble, and I was actually there to see the cast that was present. I believe it was Selena Gomez, Kumail Nanjiani. I want to say Richard Kind was there. Like, don't quote me on that, but a few of the cast members there to accept it. But Martin Short and Steve Martin, who had been snubbed every year that they went, did not come. And then Martin Short actually won for Best Lead Actor as well. So it was funny to kind of watch that. But yeah, no, it has won a few awards, and this past season was also great. They had new folks like Jane Lynch. I mentioned Kumail Nanjiani was in it. Melissa McCarthy. This last season had a ton of new folks added in.
What do you think? Who do you think is what do you think is going to take it this year?
It's interesting. I do think Only Murders Left in the Building had one of their best seasons last year, but Hacks has been the sort of perennial favorite in this category. I mean, the first year that The Bear came out, it swept all of the Emmys categories, and I believe, again, even the second year. But from its third year on, it has been losing to Hacks, and Jean Smart has been dominating the Best Lead Actress category with straight wins every year of their eligibility. So I actually think that it'll be Hacks again this year.
Okay.
It is what people consider to be the most pure comedy in the category, but don't count out a new show like Nobody Wants This or even something like Only Murders Left in the Building, because a lot of the people that are in SAG are also in the Television Academy.
Okay. Let's talk about some of these shows specifically. Severance, on the Apple side, Severance and the studio. Let's dive into that. What do you think about, I love both of them. Severance, the first season was kind of a slow burn for me that I loved, and I thought was a little bit too weird for kind of the general public, but clearly in the second season that, was not true. And then like the studio we talked about, what do you think about those two?
I think it's really interesting because both of them show, for a lot of folks, as we mentioned, who maybe not are watching Apple TV Plus post Ted Lasso, how dynamic and diverse the slate over on Apple TV is. You have Severance, this dark dystopian workplace sci-fi drama where these folks are severing parts of their personality so that they can become more appropriate corporate automatons and the cover up around it. And then on the other side, you have this farcical, very broad comedy take, The Studio. And both of them led their categories with the most nominations. The Studio tied The Bear with 23 nominations. And when you look at the nominees, both of them managed to get acting nominations for their small parts. You have Zach Cherry from Severance, as well as Trammell with his incredible marching band sequence from this past year. You have these dazzling visual set pieces of Severance, and then you have the long sweeping one shots of The Studio. And both of these shows have huge production values. Think of like F1 style production value in these television shows. And they bring out some of the best on television. I mean, Martin Scorsese and Ron Howard both earned Emmy nominations for their work on The Studio, essentially playing themselves. Zoe Kravitz did as well. And then, like I said, with those acting and also visual effects and sequence nominations for Severance.
I think too many people still sleep on Apple TV Plus. It is, for me, since day one, it has been consistently the best streamer where I know it is going to be a high quality, not just production, but well written. And like for me, Apple TV Plus, I've not gotten a miss from for anything that I've seen. It reminds me of when I was a kid and HBO was like the big thing that you went there for prestige TV. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Apple TV for me is now that place. Not that HBO doesn't have great stuff, but I feel like Apple TV is kind of the new HBO in the fact that everyone is, whether it's a hit or not, is just like a knockout. What do you think about that?
No, their consistency is key. I mean, we haven't even talked about some of the other shows that they had this year. They had a show with David Oelio called Government Cheese. They also had several docs, including like Number One on the Call Sheet, shows that have come through there previously, like Emily Dickinson, obviously Ted Lasso. Either way, I think when they have the goods, they can put out a very smart campaign, and they have put out very smart campaigns about how to get them in front of the Television Academy audiences. And again, like I just feel the creatives behind it. You have Ben Stiller, also Seth Rogen, which The Studio is one of the highest rated comedies that we have on our comedies list this year. And from the minute it premiered at South by Southwest, it has just kind of been something that both audiences and critics like it. I mean, I think we certified fresh that one before the show even came out, and it's been 93% all season.
Wow. Yeah, and they're having a great year, and I feel like, you know, they're really starting to break through at least mainstream, which is hysterical to say about Apple. A $1 trillion company, but at least in this category, you know, in this lens, with F1 being such a big hit, and you know, I really feel like they're marking their territory, if you will. It was a few years ago that Coda won the Oscar. And that was kind of like the big debut, I would say, for Apple as a serious contender here. And then they've slowly been like, you know, chipping away at that to greater and greater acclaim. And I would say awareness from like the general public of a lot of these shows. So I'm happy to see it.
Agreed.
On the other end, speaking of great shows, HBO with the White Lotus and The Pit, you know, they are still consistently putting out bangers as well that kind of have never, you know, HBO has never really gone off the map in regards to award ceremonies. Would you say? Would you agree?
No, I mean, in this past year, they led the distributor platform with the most nominations at 173. To put it in perspective, Apple had 81. Wow. So double what Apple achieved with theirs. But that is also a more comprehensive list of nominees. I mean, you could take a show like Dune, which didn't get any above the line nominations, but Dune Prophecy, that show that they did on HBO Max, received a ton of below the line nominations. Same thing for House of the Dragon. And that's not to mention, we haven't talked about it yet, they also have a very busy original film slate. And so they did Mountainhead this past year with Steve Carell, and both him and the film ended up garnering a ton of nominations. And that's just talking about the drama side. On the comedy side, they managed to score their very first 2 nominations for this quiet show that they've had on their platform called Somebody Somewhere. It is written and directed by Britt Everett, who folks will recognize. She's sort of a comedian who's been on the circuit for a long time. But it's one of those shows where your really cool friends know about it and they've been trying to get you to watch it for years, but you probably haven't. And both the show and one of the supporting actors from the show got a nomination. They got a writing nomination in that. And I think it just shows, again, HBO plays with more decks than anybody else in very different places. They will have documentary series that are nominated. They will have drama, comedy. Also, I didn't even mention the stand-up specials that they also managed to earn for nomination. So the breadth of what HBO does is just so much bigger than what some of these other folks, even Netflix, could and can do.
Speaking of that, Netflix has often been toe-to-toe with HBO in regards to noms. That's a little different this year, right?
Yeah, like I said, so HBO, I believe, topped. HBO topped the total nominations, but Netflix was still up there and definitely in the triple digits. And they always kind of go back and forth with Netflix and HBO to see who gets the best of the total nominations, because they also have the largest market share. And with Netflix, it's global. So even their global product like Squid Game that will earn some nominations, it'll happen for these products that are not even in English language that were marketed to an entirely different part of the globe. HBO manages to do this mostly with stuff that's marketed and set for North America.
And speaking of that, Shogun was one that really surprised me this year. Was that a surprise to you at all?
From last year.
Yes.
That was last year. Sorry, from last year. Yeah. No, Shogun wasn't post Squid Game, post Parasite. There's been this globalization of our viewing habits and our theater habits over the past few years. I mean, we see it on Rotten Tomatoes. We have a lot of folks that visit our site that are not from English language countries, that are not from countries that we can even translate the site easily to, but they're passionate about film, they're passionate about storytelling. And with these streamers and with the sort of access that you're able to have now with digitization, a lot of folks become fans of things being very far removed. We've seen this with K-dramas becoming popular here. A lot of the HBO products that are made here are then put on British television and other parts of Europe. So I think that is the reason why you're able to see shows like Shogun happen. Younger audiences, which are very much used to subtitles because of how they interact on the internet, they're less turned off by the idea of seeing something with subtitles, whether it be a television show or a film. So I think all of those sort of combine to make it to where, this is going to be old hat, and we'll see more what I consider international productions in the Emmys as things continue.
And is there this year a Shogun? Not, obviously that didn't do a million different noms, but is there anything kind of on the radar similar to that in an international way?
There is. They just did not receive Emmy nominations. I know Crunchyroll had a few things that it was able to get nominations for this year in some short form and animated series. But for the most part, Squid Game got some nominations below the line, stuff like that. But they were kind of shut out of those major ones. And I don't think I can think of one besides Bad Sisters, which is not foreign language, but it is an Irish an Irish production.
Oh,
that is the closest international import that made a big impact in any of the above line categories. Or if you maybe wanted to say Alfonso Cuarón's Disclaimer.
Yes.
That's in English and mostly American performers. So it's sort of international-ish.
Right. Are you going back to Squid Game for a moment? I have been obsessed since it started. And binged the last season as of now. I really thought this year that it would kind of get all these noms. I mean, I feel like traditionally award shows will, look at Lord of the Rings, where in the theaters or for the Oscars, where it was the third one that, you know what I mean? I kind of was expecting that with Squid Game. Is that not a thing on the Emmy side? Like, oh, we know it's your final season, let's praise it.
I think there's two things. The television calendar has shifted. If you look at the shows that got nominations, a lot of them premiered further back than we're used to carry over. A show like Abbott Elementary starts in September. I believe The Pit started in January of this year. Severance was already finished long before the Emmy voting season started. And a lot of these shows that premiered later, like Squid Game, for example, which premiered almost right before the voting window closed, they did not fare as well. And people forget this, but Cobra Kai used to be a part of the Emmy conversation, and they like came and went. And so, or even a show like The Rehearsal, which was also a bit later in the year than what we've typically seen. It's sort of shifting, and I think Squid Game may have suffered from its late in the calendar premiere, because I believe part 2 was what, April, May?
Yeah.
April.
Yeah. Okay. I that's a completely makes sense, taking it from,
I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's the way it felt.
Okay.
So I hope, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening either way, but yeah, it seems that way.
So zooming out, what are you expecting from the 2025 Emmys?
Well, I think it's going to be, again, some more feast or famine. I don't know which of these titles the Television Academy is going to favor more. I think sometimes there's backlash against over nominations. So like if they feel a show overperformed in absence of better things, they may take it out on that. They may be like, do we really need to have all of the guest performances of one category be for White Lotus? Because there is a category this year. I believe best guest star in a comedy, for example, they all are the studio, and then it's John Barenthal.
Right.
Some people say, oh, they may just go with John Barenthal because they don't want it to be bullied by all the folks from the studio. So that could happen. But I think it's going to be like a sweep. I think shows like Adolescence on the limited series are going to see a lot of the categories over there. I think either the White Lotus or The Pit or Severance, whichever one ends up being the one that the Television Academy loves more, it'll be a clean sweep. They'll get, lead, supporting, and a lot of the writing and acting. And as of this moment, on the comedy side, because Hacks has been so perennial and so dominating, they're the only ones I feel very safe at this point in predicting. They had an incredible season last season, even more. Somebody they brought in last season as a new assistant instantly walked into an Emmy. That shows the strength of that show.
I love that. And I didn't plan on asking about this, but just as a note, Adolescence, because I had completely forgotten about it. The second episode of that, and I know that that kid is nominated, is probably the most powerful hour of television I've ever seen in my life.
I don't disagree. And that's the thing I think Adolescence has on its side. It managed to captivate the globe and spark conversations and be incredibly entertaining and well made in 4 episodes. 4 episodes. That's it. It's in and out, and it manages to go really oceans of places in character development. So I think that actually is going to be the biggest thing about that show. And you're right. The second episode is really where you're like, oh, this isn't just good. This is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was one take, I mean, that with the kid, and I feel horrible that I don't know his name, and the therapist. I mean, that was, like I said, I would say the best hour of television I've ever seen. It was so captivating.
The character, the woman who plays the therapist, Erin Doherty, she also played Queen Anne, or Princess Anne, in The Crown. And I believe she got snubbed for her performance in that. And so this is like very just desserts that she finally gets an Emmy nomination here.
I love that. Jacqueline, where can we find you to catch up with all of your awesome coverage?
Well, you can find me at That Jacqueline anywhere, and my writing and musings about award season, particularly Emmy seasons, at RottenTomatoes.com. But be sure to check out our brand new app where you can put all of these titles on your watch list. We just launched it this past month, and now you can go on there, check scores, write your reviews, and more importantly, be like, oh, I liked Adolescence. You can go on there and find out what you should watch next.
Awesome. Jacqueline Coley, as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Weekly. Hear all the latest at popcultureweekly.com.